Oh, I hurt my rib this week. This is streaming through my server, but honestly, I haven't worked on it in a week. But it's still running, and I haven't even had to restart it. My network evidently restarted with the power outage, so I got a new IP. But it kept running. So I've been deliberating whether I should even reply to this video. I decided to do it. I'm going to do a cold watch of a Gary video on determinism, uh, just out of self-indulgence. Um, I had a really hard week trying to concentrate, particularly hard stuff. It's GraphQL stuff. It's confusing though. I figured it out, but boy, it was distracting having this. I hurt my rib or pulled a muscle in my back or something. Put my boat in, I figure. Um, Tuesday, Wednesday was excruciating. Very hard to concentrate. So I need to relax and do something mindless, like watching Gary talk. And I saw his bullshit video on immigration. I mean, it's just like decided not to reply to that. I mean, what's the point? Basically, the argument is we can't afford immigrants coming into this country because we gotta support Gary. I don't understand why one person that isn't able to have a job is different from another person. And guess what? Some of them do have jobs. We bring them in. A lot of them are going to be working. Whatever. It's just bullshit. He even knows better. He knows that you come to America, you're going to become American. But no, not Muslim. Whatever. Now I'm slipping into replying to that bullshit. So this will be bullshit too, but at least it's on determinism. And that's a subject that, even though Gary has nothing intelligent to say on it, he does touch on issues where actually valid points could be made. Let's see. So yeah, I haven't watched this. Let's see how this goes.
Yeah, making a video outside and such. Garden things are doing pretty well. Getting interesting. Lots of stuff over there. Oh, petunias. Yeah, they're just starting to happen. So some decent enough colors so far. Pink. Yeah. Anyway, got some other interesting ones over there. But anyway, we're not going over there. But yeah, it's lots of stuff growing. So pretty soon, yeah, whoop-de-doo. All right. Anyway, so determinism again, pyrrho and intercontivod. These people wish to evade the
Probably. See, that was a nice part of the video. I always like the spring and summertime and fall videos better than the winter ones. Well, I don't know. I mean, Forever Wolf Films is excellent clay sculptures capture the winter vibe. It might be the realer one.
real significance of what we do know to be the origins of life on Earth, and therefore the potential meaning of it all. We're just
See, I can stop the video with the space bar, but then it always starts at the same
like that
point, and then I end up having to watch the whole thing. So that's the problem with that.
little daisy there, just little daisies. Just a manifestation of biology, and oak trees, acorns grow into oak trees, not ephelymps, ephelymps. Hippopotamuses breed hippopotamus, blah blah blah. There's no, there's the that irises over there. They're not going to come out some kind of you know bizarre manifestation unless you.
I thought, is this video on young Earth creationism? Because I'm sure I've heard this argument from Kent Hovind. That's almost word for word. Uh, I think we're about to see a big pivot out there in theological mentam.
You do something, unless you irradiate them, or you do something physically, a cause and effect chain of events. And so Pyrrho turns this, uses the the fudge in physics to make declarations about what's a fact. And so
What flavor is the fudge?
instead of just conceding that there's parts of physics where we don't have a videotape, the Heisenberg principle, for example, this idea that the idea that the entity, the forces in nature um, are somehow androgynous. They don't know where they are, who they are, what they are, and they're not. They're cause and effect. It's just that we don't have a videotape of the causes and the effects. And there's a range of outcomes that have to do with the fact that we can't calculate all the influences. It's kind
Right, it's just a matter of all the shit you don't know works this way you're 100% sure of. I mean, it just happens to be that what you're most sure of is exactly the stuff you don't know. I mean, and then I call you on it.
of like a kayak going down the Colorado River or something. There's a ton of influences. We can't calculate them all. We can't predict where the boat's going to go. But what we do know is it's not going to go to Pluto. It's not going to land on.
Right, it's bounded. It's bounded. It's bounded. It's kind of like this. When you roll dice, it's random. You don't know what number it's going to come up. But if you roll it 1,000 times, fuck, you could start a casino by figuring out which numbers that you get to bet on. It's bounded. The numbers off the dice are from 2 to 12. No 1s, no 13s. It's bounded. But it's not deterministic because in each individual case, you can't figure out what it'll be. It is statistically characterizable. There's a statistics that's going to come out of it, and that's why we have predictability. Because in our universe, we use a statistical number of samples to figure out what a general rule is and what the standard deviation is. And then we know that if you drop something from a mile up, it'll take, this long to hit the ground, plus or minus a few seconds. If it's a lead ball. If it's a feather, then it's plus or minus, God only knows. Anything can happen with the feather. The plus or minus can scale depending on the aerodynamics and other situations. So I think that's pretty obviously not what you're claiming. You're claiming that the exact situation is predictable. That's not that there's a boundary, like I'm not going to sprout wings. That doesn't make me deterministic just because you've excluded some possibilities. Everybody, this came up in comments too in that video with somebody not Gary. You know, it's like just because you know a bounding condition, like we must exist in order for us to be having this conversation. That doesn't make the universe deterministic. It's just like nobody's really going to say willpower is free. Will costs energy. To will something costs energy. And then your body trying to execute that will, breaking out of a prison, that also takes more energy. It takes energy. Things are bounded, for example, by energy costs. But that doesn't make them deterministic. That's a different subject, in fact.
On one of the moons on Saturn. It's not going to suddenly materialize, on 42nd Street. It's a deterministic cause and effect.
So those people smart enough to know that determinism is stupid. It's definitely a stupid assumption. It's an interesting idea, like a lot of science fiction. One of my favorite science fiction authors, this guy Greg Egan, he wrote some great stories about determinism and like people that could get a diary sent back in time 100 years so you could read your own diary during your own life and stuff, and how that came out and how people tried to change with their diary, but they never would because it was what they wrote at that time, and it's just the way, it's a kind of a description of a compatibilism. Very interesting. But in our society of psychosis, since there's so many people trying to check out of their responsibility for their part in the world, and they're going to say, hey, since I am not a Hindu guru that can use my willpower to fly, there can't be any willpower. Right? Boundaries, that's a fact of all physics. Bounding conditions, finite amounts of energy. That does not mean determinism.
World we live in. And the biology is just a manifestation of that clockwork and machine-like. And it all has to do with this attraction and repulsion force that exists in the foundations of the function between material bits, protons and electrons, and the force bits, the quanta of photons. So you have electrons and protons. I hope I just said that right. You have electrons and protons. They're this material hard bit. And then you have these photons, which are also probably hard bits, but they're small bits. And they're the force bits. And they manifest in gravity and magnetism, in the nuclear forces. And they're what is moving the material bits around, pushing them, creating tension in the environment. And that tension leads to this complex chemistry eventually. It starts off with a simple hydrogen atom, and then it goes to helium and lithium and blah, 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 blah. And we know all of this. There's nothing magical. There's no Sasquatches here. And the only stuff we don't know is just certain particulars. How many hairs are on the black bear? Yeah, okay, we don't know, but we know what the range is. We know there's not an
Well, if it's deterministic, then you have to have a way that that could be known. But obviously, for ordinary people, well, not ordinary, but for the people watching, uh, this is entirely beside the point. Counting how many grains of sand there are on, Huntington Beach, right, is that's not what we're debating. I will grant there are a finite number of grains of sand, and that in principle they could be counted, each and every one of them. The blurry part there would come where, well, what counts as the beach? How far out underwater do you go? Things like that, right? So getting down to an exact number one would be difficult. But let's just say, well, you go out until every last piece of sand you found, there's no more sand within a centimeter, and you could count all of those grains of sand in the whole beach. That's not what we're talking about in the theoretical determinability. We're talking about the fact that you could know what state a molecule would be in, that there's no chaotic organizational systems in there that operate by by the rules of chemistry. The rules of chemistry, which we know are chaotic systems that, according to quantum mechanics, have random perturbations. An odd kind of random perturbation because they never violate conservation, conservation of energy. So that's odd that they never do that. So there's something very organized about them. But being deterministic in the sense of there being one future. 1,000 years from now, there's one possible future and it's going to happen. That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about how hard it would be to count the grains of sand at a particular beach. We're talking about whether or not 1,000 years from now there's one possible outcome. And there's more than one possible outcome, right? And if you want to experiment with it, see if you can affect your own life by trying to affect the outcomes of the experiences you go through. See if it makes a difference. See if when you do nothing, do 3 experiments. On one hand, for the neutral, the control, when you come up to a situation and it's like, I want it to turn out that way, not that way, do nothing. And next time you come up to the same situation, do something you think will help. The next time, do something you think will hurt the situation. And then see if you affect the situation or not.
infinite number of hairs. We know the hairs aren't going to materialize on 42nd Street. They're not going to start growing out of the asphalt.
This is wasting
So
time now.
there's no room for anything but an understanding that our neurons are programmed by our environment, by the combination of our biological chemistry, our genetic endowment, and
Yeah, there is a program, but because of non-deterministic effects, the end result is not determinable ahead of time. It's not determined ahead of time because there is this random statistical noise that enters in. More than one path can be taken. And somewhere in that area of more than one path can be taken, the will chooses to take one path rather than another. And again, I urge you to experiment in your own life. Try sitting there and doing nothing about experimenting regarding your physics. And then the next week, do that for a week. Then the next week, try doing something and see what the difference is. See if there's any difference about what gets done.
The circumstances of the environment as it's brought on to us and what kind of stresses and in what order those stresses are imposed, whether our camel's back gets broken when we're 6 years old or whether it doesn't. All of these things are going to decide what your will is and what your psychology is and what your desires are and what your ambitions are and what your knowledge base is. And there's nothing else. There's no such thing as will. There's just ideas. Your brain makes ideas. It combines two circumstances and it adds 2 plus 2. You watch
Yeah, your brain is the thing willing. Your brain, it's material matter that's doing the willing. It's the physical stuff that's doing the willing. There is no non-physical thing because a non-physical thing can't impart energy on your brain, so it can't be connected to your brain with puppet strings. It's your brain itself doing the willing. What can't you get about that? It is your brain itself creating those ideas. Yeah, it's a construction. It's got constraints, it has design, it has limited energy available to it. And most of the energy, yeah, is going to be spent executing the programs from evolution and from previous experiences. You're just executing those programs. But a small percent we have available for us to change the way we do things. Since it is possible to change the way you do things, and it can either be random, like a waterfall flowing down a hill going on a gradient, it follows a deterministic gradient, but the path of all the molecules, that follows a chaotic stochastic path that nonetheless never violates the gradient, the slope of the ground by very much. But by a little bit, it does that all the time. It doesn't go just on the perfect line down, it splashes all around. Sometimes it splashes over and up and into the air. Some of the water splashes into the air and gets carried off in the air. That's how it works.
somebody get run over in the intersection because they didn't look both ways, and you say, gee, that looking both ways probably is a good idea. Maybe I'll make sure I do that. Really, maybe I'll do it twice. Look twice, get run over no times. Good little policies. That's an idea. That's not
That's using your will.
will. That's not
That
free.
is.
That's just a
Nothing's free. Everything takes energy. It takes energy. People that don't spend the energy on it, they don't start looking both ways, and they're the next one that gets hit. And then people that do spend their energy, they look both ways, and they also get hit sometimes, but less. Statistically less. You can't determine looking both ways doesn't mean you will absolutely never get hit. It just reduces the chances. We're talking about statistics.
being given the mathematical components and being able to see the relationship. It's somebody drawing you the picture of the triangle and showing you the squares of the lines, and you can understand that lengths are related to the
So what you're saying is that somebody drew a picture of a triangle and told you it was a square, and that's why you don't get math?
area of the squares or something. And it gives you an understanding. An understanding is not a will. An understanding is an enlightenment.
No, an understanding is a will.
Um, it's just reasoning and logic. It's a kind of mathematics.
It's just reasoning and logic, and lots of things with no will, reason and logic, like a rock, or water. When the water decides, hey, where am I going to go downhill? It says, reasonably, I should go down the slope. Yeah, there's no reason and logic without will. Who the fuck are you trying to fool? You have a theory of that, an old theory related to theism that says what you're saying. But your experiences, each and every experience says otherwise.
And it's determined. It has a logical foundation in mathematics. 2 plus 2 will always equal 4. It doesn't matter what you call 2. It doesn't matter what you call 4. The concept of 2, 2-ness plus 2-ness will equal 4-ness. The end. It's not going to be.
Well, no, that's not true. For example, it depends, when you're talking about the real world, it depends on to what. Because like with velocity, 2 plus 2 doesn't always equal 4. There's distorted spaces and stuff. You just don't know math, let's just face. You don't know math. 2 plus 2 equals 4 is true in the only mathematics that you know, which we call simple arithmetic. Plus, minus, divide, but not exactly how they apply to the real world.
5, it's not going to be 7, it's not going to be any of that
Look, I don't think I'm being mean. Obviously, he does not get math.
crap. So, the whole argument is these
Oh, by the way, breaking news. Mathematician Heitlade, first angry, hates Cantor, hates angry at. See, that's why YouTube's worth it. You meet a mathematician that doesn't like Cantor. I didn't know those existed.
people don't like the limiting facts of nature. They don't like the fact that I can point out that 10,000 baby sea turtles will be horribly and brutally killed for one turtle to reach maturation. I got
Um, has nothing to do with that. Just you're trying to get sympathy because baby turtles suffer, but you're no baby turtle.
a photograph. Maybe I can't show it in this video, but some future video I'll put it in. There's a little garter.
Which is to say, I sympathize for the turtles, not for Gary. Gary doesn't get my sympathy because the turtles, and I'm just as pro animal rights as Gary. I only eat food that was already killed, that wasn't going to come back to life, just like Gary. And and I've actually been taking part in some activism about research regarding medical research on animals, and I believe that it's sad that that's how the baby turtle system works. Um, so I don't understand how me thinking that there's a thing called willpower, constrained by your situation, in that depending on your situation, a different amount of willpower is required. For example, if you're trying to break out of a prison uh, that you were unjustly imprisoned in, um, it takes a certain amount of will power and energy just to try to escape. And then it takes a whole lot more physical energy to actually accomplish the escape and willpower. So that's not free. All right, I'll make part two in a